My sister accused me of stealing $5,000 and threw me out. But when police discovered she was the thief, her empire collapsed and my family was left broken. I'm 29 years old. I work at a hardware store and run a small online shop that sells handmade products. And honestly, I never thought I'd get to this point after everything that happened like 2 years ago. Because basically my family destroyed me. I mean, they accused me of something I never did and threw me out on the street like I was garbage. And now that everything's fallen apart for them, they want me to help them. But I'll get to that part. I guess I should start at the beginning, when my life went to hell, and I had no idea things could get worse. Look, I was always the one who had to work twice as hard to get half the recognition that my sister Diana received just for existing. You know what I mean? Diana was 3 years older than me. Always was the family star. The pretty one, the smart one, the one who did everything perfect, according to my parents. I wasn't ugly or stupid, but I was never enough. You know, there was always something I could improve, something Diana did better. When Diana opened her clothing and accessories store like 6 years ago, my parents wouldn't stop bragging about her. Like she's so entrepreneurial, so successful, just look at her. And there I was with my crafts business that barely gave me enough to live on. But hey, at least it was mine, and I'd built it alone without asking anyone for a penny. Things were fine. I mean, not great but stable. Until 2020 came and you know what happened. COVID basically killed my business. I sold at craft fairs, local markets, that kind of thing, and suddenly everything got canceled. I tried selling online, but I had no idea how to navigate social media, and the money was running out fast. By mid-2021, I was desperate, literally eating noodles every day and like 3 months behind on rent. I hated the idea of asking my family for help because I knew exactly how it was going to be, but I had no choice. So I called my mom one night and explained the situation, trying not to sound as pathetic as I felt. My mom told me to talk to Diana, that she had space in her house and that maybe she could help me. Diana was married to Matthew A., super quiet guy who I always liked, honestly, and they lived in a big house on the outskirts of town. One of those houses that makes you think they're doing really well financially. When I talked to Diana on the phone, she sounded all understanding and generous. Like, oh, little sister, of course I'm going to help you. Come live with us. I'll lend you money so you can catch up on your debts. And plus you can work in my store to earn something while you recover. It sounded too good to be true. But I was so desperate, I didn't analyze it much. I moved in with them in September 2021, I think. Or maybe it was October. I don't remember exactly. Diana lent me like $2,000 to pay what I owed in rent and other things, and I signed a promissory note and everything all formal because she insisted. The house was nice. Seriously. But they gave me the secretaria, a smallest room. Basically a maid's room that had its own bathroom but was tiny. Diana told me it was temporary. That in a few months I'd be back on my feet. I started working in her store like 3 days after arriving, and that's when I realized this wasn't going to be what I thought. Diana's store was big, located in the center of town, and sold clothes, bags, accessories, jewelry, a ton of things. It seemed super successful. There were always customers coming in and out, and Diana managed everything, like she was the CEO of a Fortune 500 company. You know, giving me orders all the time, making me do inventory, clean, serve customers, pack online orders. She paid me minimum wage. Literally. And when I asked if we could talk about a raise after a couple months, she told me to consider that I was living free in her house, and that was already my raise. I mean, technically she was right, but it felt horrible. Like she was doing me this huge favor, and I should be grateful. I worked like 10 hours a day at the store, 6 days a week. And on my day off, Diana would ask me to help her with things around the house or to watch her 4-year-old son. He didn't mention she had a son. Did I? Well, she does. His name is something like Brandon or Brendan. I don't remember well because I was so exhausted all the time. The details get blurry. Matthew was almost never home. He worked in sales or something and traveled a lot, and when he was there, he looked tired and stressed. At the time, I didn't think much of it. I thought it was just his personality. But looking back, there were signs that things weren't as good as they seemed. Like 4 months went by like that, from September to January more or less. And I was saving every penny I could to eventually leave. But it was hard because I barely had money left after buying my basic stuff. Diana charged me for the food I ate at her house. Like she kept a mental tab of everything and would tell me things like, well, this week you ate with us. 5 times, so that's $30. It was ridiculous, but I couldn't say anything because I depended completely on her. My parents would come visit her all the time, like once or twice a week, and it was always the same thing. Diana is so generous. Diana is saving your life. You should be eternally grateful. And I just nodded and smiled because what else could I do? Then February 2022 came, and that's when everything exploded. One day I woke up, checked my phone like I do every morning, and there was a notification from my bank saying my account was in the negative. I panicked, opened the app, and saw that all my money had disappeared. I had like $1,300 saved. It wasn't much, but it was everything I had. And my account showed 0. Actually, it showed -100 because there was an overdraft charge. There was a transfer of $1,400 to an account I didn't recognize, made the day before, at 3 in the afternoon. I sat there on my bed feeling like I was going to throw up. I called the bank immediately, explained to them that I hadn't authorized that transfer, that someone had hacked my account or something. The person at the bank told me they would investigate, but that the transfer seemed legitimate because it had been made with my user information and password, from my phone specifically, according to the records. I swore I hadn't made that transfer, that I didn't even have that option enabled on my app, but they said it would take several days to investigate, and that in the meantime they couldn't do anything. I went straight to talk to Diana. She was in the kitchen drinking coffee, all calm. And when I told her what happened, she made a worried face and told me how horrible that it must have been a hacker, that these things happen all the time. Something in her tone sounded weird to me, like too rehearsed. But I was so upset I didn't process it well at that moment. I asked her if she could lend me some money, while the bank resolved the problem, because I literally didn't even have money to buy food. And she told me, sure, not to worry, that she'd lend me $100, but that she was noting it in my debt because she'd already lent me a lot and needed to keep track. 2 days later, like at 8 at night, my parents arrived at Diana's house. I was in my room, resting after a long shift at the store, and I heard them knock on my bedroom door really hard. I opened it, and there they were, all three. My mom, my dad, and Diana, all with serious faces, like a court of justice or something. My dad told me, we need to talk to you now. And I followed them to the living room, not understanding what was happening. Diana started talking first. She told me she had discovered something very serious, that it hurt her a lot to have to say it, but that she couldn't keep covering for me. I was like, what are you talking about? Completely confused. And then she dropped the bomb. She accused me of having stolen money from a Doc Early family bank account that my parents had. She said she had found evidence that I had transferred $5,000 from that account to mine, and that then I had moved the money to another account to hide it. She showed papers, printouts of bank statements, screenshots. Everything looked super official and detailed. I stood there unable to breathe properly. Literally felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. I tried to say that was a lie, that I hadn't done any of that, that I didn't even have access to that family account. He didn't even know that account existed, to be honest. But Diana kept talking, saying that she had been investigating because she noticed weird movements in the family finances, and that everything pointed to me. My mom was crying, saying, how could you do this to us? We opened the doors of this house to you. And my dad just looked at me with disgust, like he didn't even recognize me. I tried to explain about my account, that they had stolen my money too, that this had to be a mistake or a setup. But no one was listening to me. Diana said it was very convenient that I reported my money as stolen right after she discovered the family theft, that obviously it was my way of covering myself. She had an answer for everything. Everything I said she turned against me, and my parents believed her everything, because Diana never lied. Diana was the perfect daughter. Diana would never do something like that. My dad told me I had until the next day to leave that house. He said I was a disgrace, that he couldn't believe his daughter was a thief, that he didn't want to see me again. My mom cried but didn't defend me. She just said, how could I have disappointed them like that? I tried to beg them to listen to me, to give me time to prove my innocence, but it was like talking to a wall. Diana stood there with a face of, I can't stand having to do this, but it's the right thing, and I just wanted to scream at her that she was a liar, but I knew that would only make things worse. That night, I didn't sleep at all. I stayed in my room, packing my things in 2 suitcases I had. Basically, my whole life fit in 2 suitcases. Can you believe it? I had no money. I had nowhere to go. I had nothing. I thought about calling a friend. But the truth is, I'd lost contact with most of my friends during the last few years because I'd been so focused on surviving that I hadn't maintained relationships. There was a girl, Sophia, who I'd met at one of the craft fairs before COVID, and I sent her a message at 3 in the morning explaining the situation. She responded like at 7, saying I could stay on her couch for a while, that she lived with 2 roommates but they'd make space. The next morning, I left before Diana woke up. Matthew was in the kitchen making coffee, and when he saw me with the suitcases, he looked uncomfortable, like he knew something had happened but didn't want to get involved. He told me he was sorry things had ended like this, and I just told him thanks for everything and left. I took an Uber to Sophia's house, spending money I didn't have, and arrived there feeling like the worst garbage in the world. Sophia and her roommates were incredible, honestly. They let me stay on their couch, didn't charge me anything the first 2 weeks, and helped me look for work. I applied to a ton of places, but it was hard because I didn't have recent work references. You couldn't put Diana, obviously, and my resume looked all weird with that gap of months. I finally got a job at a bakery, like doing the opening shift from 5 in the morning to 1 in the afternoon, earning a little more than minimum but nothing amazing. The work was exhausting, being on my feet all day, dealing with customers who were sometimes horrible, smelling like bread all the time, which sounds nice, but believe me, after a month you hate it. But I needed the money. I paid my share of the rent to Sophia from the first paycheck, like $300 a month, that she didn't want to accept, but I insisted because I didn't want to be a burden. During those first months, it was basically surviving, not living. I'd wake up at 4 in the morning, go to the bakery, come back home dead tired, eat something cheap, and fall asleep at 8 at night. On weekends, I worked extra shifts when I could. I didn't talk to my family at all. They didn't try to contact me either. And honestly, I didn't want to know anything about them. Like 3 months into being at the bakery, the owner of a hardware store who was a regular customer offered me a job. He said he needed someone at the counter, that I seemed responsible, and that he could teach me everything I needed to know. The pay was better, like $3 more per hour, and the schedule was more normal, 9 to 6. I accepted without thinking much about it. The hardware store was an interesting place. Like I learned a ton of random things about tools and construction materials, and the owner, a guy like 60 years old, named Roberto, was super cool. He treated me with respect, taught me things, and never made me feel inferior. Little by little, I started to feel more stable. After 6 months living with Sophia, I got my own apartment, a small studio, but it was mine. I started making crafts again in my free time, just for myself at first, like therapy more than anything. Roberto let me put some things in the hardware store to sell on consignment, and suddenly people started buying them. Nothing crazy, but it was something. Like a year and a half had passed since they'd kicked me out of Diana's house. We're talking about August 2023, more or less, when I received a message from Matthew on Facebook. We hadn't talked since I left, so I was surprised to see him in my messages. The message said something like, "Hi Grace, I know this is weird, but I need to talk to you about something important. Can we meet for coffee?" I was tempted to ignore it, but curiosity got the better of me. Plus Matthew had never done anything bad to me. So I told him okay. We met at a coffee shop on the other side of town, far from where Diana and my parents lived. Matthew looked horrible, like he'd lost weight, had dark circles, looked stressed to the max. He sat down and started talking without beating around the bush. He told me that Diana was in serious trouble, that her business was collapsing, that there was a criminal investigation against her, and that they needed help. I was like, wait, what? Because I didn't understand anything. Matthew then told me the whole truth. Turns out Diana had been selling counterfeit products in her store for years. Fake designer bags, jewelry that she said was from expensive brands but was cheap crap from China, clothes with fake labels, everything. Apparently she'd started small, but when she saw that people bought without asking questions, she became more and more daring. The business looked successful because she sold expensive things at good prices, and people thought they were getting bargains on original products. Matthew said he didn't know until recently that Diana handled the whole business alone, and he didn't get into those details. But wait, because it gets worse. Matthew told me that Diana had been using my parents' money to maintain the illusion of success. My parents had given her like $15,000 over the years to invest in the business, and Diana used that money to pay personal bills, their house mortgage, trips, all those things that made it seem like they were doing really well. And when she needed more money, She'd invent business emergencies to get more out of my parents. And here comes what made me feel like I'd been kicked in the chest again. Deanna had stolen my money. Yes, it was $1,400, but she had hacked my bank account. She had moved my money, and then she had blamed me for the family account theft, which was also her. Obviously to cover herself and to get rid of me because I was their way. Seeing too closely how her business worked. Everything had been calculated, coldly planned to destroy me. I couldn't speak. Literally felt like I couldn't breathe. Matthew kept talking, saying that one of the brands Diana was counterfeiting had investigated and reported the store, that there were federal inspections involved, that Diana was facing criminal charges for fraud and sale of counterfeit products, that prosecutors were also investigating money laundering because the bank transactions were a mess. Deanna's assets were frozen, including joint bank accounts with Matthew, and basically they were broke. Matthew looked at me with puppy dog eyes and told me they needed help, that if I could lend them money to pay for a lawyer, that he knew I was angry, but at the end of the day, we were family. I stayed quiet for a long moment, just looking at him, and then I started laughing. It wasn't happy laughter. It was laughter of disbelief, of anger, of bitterness. I told him, "Seriously? You seriously come here to ask me for help after your wife destroyed my life, stole from me, made me look like a thief in front of my family, and got me thrown out on the street with nothing? After I spent months eating noodles and sleeping on a couch because I had nowhere else to go? Now that she's in trouble, you come to me?" Matthew tried to say something about how he didn't know any of that Diana had told him another version. But I interrupted him. I told him it wasn't my problem, that they had made their bed and now they could lie in it, and that it seemed poetic to me that Diana finally had to face the consequences of her actions. I got up from the table, left a $5 bill for my coffee, and left. Matthew called me a couple times, but I blocked him. Like a week later, I got a call from my mom. I hadn't talked to her in over a year and a half, and when I saw her name on my phone, my stomach flipped. I answered, and she immediately started crying, saying she needed to talk to me, that she had made a terrible mistake, that she was sorry. I asked her, sorry, for what specifically? And there was an uncomfortable silence. Then she said that Diana had confessed that she had stolen the money, that she had lied about me, that my parents were devastated to realize they had thrown their innocent daughter out on the street. My mom started asking me for forgiveness, saying she should have listened to me, that she should have given me the benefit of the doubt, that she missed me, that please would I come to the house to talk with them. And then, and this was what made me hang up, she told me that Diana needed help with legal expenses, and if I could contribute something because, at the end of the day, she was still my sister. I interrupted her right there and told her, with the coldest voice I could, that Diana wasn't my sister, that they weren't my family, that they had made that very clear when they kicked me out without giving me the chance to defend myself, and that what happened to them now wasn't my problem. I hung up and blocked her number too. I blocked my whole family on everything. Phone, social media, email, everything. I didn't want to know anything about them. The truth is that the first days after those conversations, I felt weird, like a mix of satisfaction and sadness. Satisfaction because finally the truth had come to light and Diana was paying for what she did. But sadness because I had basically lost my whole family. And even though they were horrible to me, it still hurt to know I wasn't going to have that connection ever again. But you know what? I started to feel freer after that. It's weird to explain, but it was like I could finally close that chapter and focus on my own life without having that pending thing in my head. I concentrated on working at the hardware store. Roberto even promoted me to supervisor after a year there and raised my salary pretty well. I kept making crafts and expanded my product line. One day, Roberto suggested I open a real online store, not just sell on consignment, and he helped me set everything up. Like 6 months ago, like April or May of this year, I applied for a small business grant that was aimed at people who had overcome significant adversities. I had to write an essay telling my story, without naming specific names, about how I'd lost everything, how I'd been falsely accused of something I didn't do, and how I'd managed to rebuild my life from scratch. It was hard to write it without getting emotional. But I did it. I didn't think I was going to win anything. There are thousands of stories of people who've been through worse things, but a month later I received an email saying I'd won a $10,000 grant to invest in my business. I cried when I read that email. I'm not going to lie. I cried like I hadn't cried in years, but this time it was relief and happiness. I used that money to buy materials in bulk improve my work setup, invest in advertising for my online store, and I even hired someone part-time to help me with orders because I was having more orders than I could handle alone. My online store is called something generic about handmade crafts. I'm not going to give the exact name here for obvious reasons, but basically I sell things like handmade jewelry, home decorations, personalized stationery items, that kind of thing. Sales have been incredible, much better than I expected. I'm not getting rich or anything, but I'm earning enough to live comfortably, save a little, and even treat myself sometimes. Roberto is super proud of me. He says he always knew I had potential for something big. Sophia and I are still close friends. She's basically the sister that Diana never was. Like 2 months ago, I got a certified letter from a lawyer. It was from my parents, formally asking me to withdraw any possible claims against Diana or against them. What claims? I hadn't even sued them or anything. And to consider helping the family, financially in these difficult times. The letter was full of pretentious legal language, but basically it was another way of asking me for money. I threw it in the trash without even finishing reading it. The last I heard, because I found out through town gossip through a hardware store customer, is that Diana made a plea deal with the prosecutors. Like she pleaded guilty to some minor charges in exchange for them dropping the more serious ones, and she got like 2 years probation, community service, and a huge fine that she'll probably never be able to pay. My parents had to sell their house because Diana owed them so much money they couldn't maintain the mortgage, and now they live in a small apartment in a not-so-good neighborhood in town. Matthew divorced Diana, which doesn't surprise me at all, and apparently he moved to another state to start over away from this whole mess. Do I feel sorry for them? Honestly, no, not one bit. Sometimes I wonder if I'm a bad person for not feeling compassion, but then I remember that night when they kicked me out of the house, when they called me a thief and a disgrace to the family without even giving me the chance to explain, when I was left with nothing, because they chose to believe Diana without questioning anything. I remember the nights I spent crying on Sophia's couch, feeling like the most insignificant garbage in the world, without money to eat well, without hope that things would get better. I went through all that alone, without them. And I got ahead alone. Without them. Life is weird. You know? 2 years ago, I was at the worst moment of my life, thinking I was never going to get out of that hole. And now I'm here, with my own business that's growing, with a good job I like, with real friends who supported me when I needed it most. Meanwhile, Diana lost everything. Her parents are broke, and everyone is facing the consequences of their own actions. I didn't have to do anything to get revenge. Life took care of that on its own. And I guess there's something poetically just about that. Sometimes I think about what it would be like if my mom called me now. If she really apologized from the heart without asking me for anything in return. If she fully acknowledged the damage they did to me. Honestly, I don't know if I'd be able to forgive them. Part of me wants to believe I would. That eventually I could let go of all that resentment. But another part of me, the part that still remembers standing in that living room while they called me a thief, that part doesn't want to forgive ever. And maybe that's okay. Maybe not everything has to end with reconciliations and happy endings. What I do know is that I'm proud of myself for the first time in a long time. Proud of having gotten up when everyone expected me to stay down. Proud of having built something real with my own hands and my own effort. Proud of having survived something that could have easily destroyed me. And that, at the end of the day, is more valuable than any apology they could offer me. Last week, a customer came to the hardware store and recognized me from my online store. She told me she loved my products, that she'd seen my story on the grant page and that she found it inspiring. I thanked her a little awkwardly because I'm not used to that kind of attention, but after she left, I kept thinking about it. About how my story, as horrible as it was to live through it, is now something that can inspire other people who are going through difficult times. And that feels good. Honestly, it feels like all that suffering at least served for something bigger than me. I don't know what's going to happen in the future, if eventually I'll be able to completely let go of all this anger and resentment, or if I'm going to carry this forever. But what I do know is that I'm fine now, better than I've been in years. And that's enough for the moment. Diana, my parents, that whole chapter of my life is closed and I don't plan to open it again. They made their choices, I made mine, and now we're all living with the consequences. And honestly, I'm at peace with that.